I'll have the bacon cheeseburger.
Got it. That'll be right up.
Oh, man. I wish I would have gotten that. You know what to do. Audible. Chicken wing, chicken wing, chicken wing. 42, 42.
I got you, Rocco.
There's nothing better than getting what you want, and Sweet Caroline's Kitchen and Cocktails has everything you want. Great burgers, sandwiches, wings, and more. Call an audible on your next meal out. Sweet Caroline's Kitchen and Cocktails, Ames.
A fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Cheaper, cleaner, and homegrown. Pump it up with Unleaded 88.
Welcome into the Channel Seed Studios. We've got bigger than 12 for you on this fine Wednesday morning following week 1 of college football. I'm going to adjust my camera just a little bit. Joined by Derek Duke down there in lovely Texas on this Iowa Everywhere program. How are you, Derek?
Jake, it's been quite the weekend, man. Opening weekend of Big 12 football. It feels like it's been nonstop action since Thursday because it has been. And then if you stayed up Saturday like I try to do, I mean, you're watching Big 12 football from 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. Central Time. So I mean, you're getting like 14 hours of Big 12 football right there alone. So it's been quite the weekend. I'm a little tired too. I'll tell you what, I stayed up about, I had 3 days till probably about 1 a.m. covering those 3 games on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So it's some rest was definitely needed, but it was a good weekend overall.
Dude, I feel you. Week 1 hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. So I'm ready for these next couple days, refresh. We're going to be all in for week 2 because it is a huge, enormous weekend, and it's also been a pretty big week here at Iowa Everywhere as Murph and Andy got underway Monday. It was cool to have them back, cool to have them on the program. Just it's the best in the business.
Two Iowa legends back in action. Saw they were in Perry, Iowa, being Oskaloosa on Wednesday, so really cool to have them on board at Iowa Everywhere. And it's like I said, those two they set the standard for sports radio in the state of Iowa, and it was really cool to have them join the team.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's jump into the 12 and 12. Let's start here, Derek. Who was your most impressive team in week 1?
I think there's definitely a couple candidates that are worthy of this spot here, but I'm going to take somebody. If you didn't stay up late, you probably won't know about it, but I'm taking Arizona State. They beat Wyoming 48-7 in that game. The defense in that had a pick 6, and I felt like once that happened, Arizona State never looked back. Quarterback Sam Levitt, he showed me a few things. Had over 240 yards in the ground. And the defense, this is what really impressed me about Arizona State, was their defense held Wyoming to just 118 yards on the day total. So that was really, really impressive. Was not expecting a beatdown. Like, I know Wyoming is not a great football team, obviously, with the spread. But for Arizona State to put that kind of beatdown on them, beat them by over 40 points, I did not see that coming. And Arizona State, if you're not careful, they could be one of those teams that sneak up on you, maybe beat somebody they're not supposed to in this conference.
Yeah, and that spread, it was 6. 6 points is all Arizona State was favored by. I know from experience because I took Wyoming. I like the spot for Wyoming. And if you follow me on Twitter, Jake Brend TV, you know that I've been updating my betting list. You might notice that I guess betting rules. And well, the newest rule is don't bet on any team just because they've got a really good running back in college football. And that's why I bet on Wyoming, and I was dead wrong. I know they beat Texas Tech last year. It's another team we'll get into.
Yeah.
But I was expecting kind of a grinded out game, and Arizona State just floored them. And that's not an FCS team. That's a Mountain West team. That's a really, really good win. I'm going to go with Oklahoma State. They did beat an FCS team, but they aren't your average FCS team. They beat the champs, South Dakota State, a team that I think could probably finish in the top half of most like group of 5 leagues. They could maybe even make a push for a team like a Colorado or a Cincinnati in a conference like the Big 12. So to go out and just flat out dominate, start to finish. So impressive. They proved once again they've got the best running back in the country, and they've got an offensive line that is the most experienced in college football, and it looked like that. So all that combined to make a statement in what everyone around the country would consider a trap game. Really, really impressive.
Yeah, South Dakota State back-to-back FCS champions. So definitely that was very impressive for Oklahoma State. Speaking now, we're going to go on the flip side of that. Most disappointing Big 12 team of the weekend. Jake, who you got?
Ooh, I'm going to go Texas Tech. I think there's 3 or 4 options you could have gone, but Tech goes to overtime with Albion Christian. Is that how you say it?
Abilene.
Abilene. Spoken like a true Iowan.
We'll teach you a little Texan here on the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, Texas everywhere for the next hour. But to go to overtime with not just an FCS opponent, but an FCS opponent that is not a marquee FCS opponent, it's really, really disappointing, especially considering how Tech started their season last year. We just mentioned it, losing to Wyoming. I know a win's a win, but it certainly doesn't feel like it down there in Lubbock.
No, for sure. They definitely avoided disaster for the second year in a row there. So for me, I'm going to go another kind of underrated one that probably a game that flew under the radar to many Big 12 fans, probably, and just people across the country in general. I'm going Houston. I know they were picked to finish last in the conference. Like, I get that. They're not supposed to be good. They're not supposed to make a bowl game. They were actually favored in this UNLV game, and I could not for the life of me figure out why that was, because I was taking UNLV all the way. It wasn't even going to be close, in my opinion. But I did think Houston was going to keep it respectable. But they lost 27-7 at home against UNLV. Donovan Smith was terrible, completed less than 50% of his passes, 2 interceptions. He looked like a shell of himself, which is not saying much because he has not been great. He's been very inconsistent throughout his career, but he looked like a shell of himself for the guy we saw last year and the guy we saw in Lubbock for 2 years, for that matter. Jake, get this. They averaged 1 yard per rush on the day. 1 yard per rush. The defense, for me, they held on as long as they could, but the offense just gave them nothing. And, I get it. It's going to be a long year for head coach Willie Fritz. And I know it's going to be a complete rebuild there, but for them to not even be competitive in this game at all just really, really surprised me and caught me off guard.
Yeah, and UNLV, I would imagine still the bulk of our listeners are Iowa State fans. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all the support. This isn't the same UNLV team that Iowa State went out and beat by, I think, 40, 50 points back in 21 out in Vegas. But it's still, this isn't a probably college football playoff contender UNLV. They're certainly not the top tier of a group of 5 team, and to not even be competitive at home. That's a rough start to the Willie Fritz era. And of course, he's got time. He's got plenty of time, and he's a good recruiter. But man, judging by that, it could be a rough year for the Cougs. And Iowa State gets them September 28th down there in Houston.
Might have to go to that one.
Yeah, might get to witness a pretty comfortable Cyclone victory.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to piggyback off of my most disappointing team. And I just want to ask, I feel like Derek would know the answer to this question better than me, because I'm genuinely asking this question. Question 3 of 12 in the 12 and 12 here on the Bigger Than 12 podcast on Iowa Everywhere. Where does the Texas Tech hype come from every single year?
You know, it's funny you asked that, because there's somebody that asked me that a couple months back on a different radio station. For me, I don't know if there is true hype around Texas Tech. Like, people last year were excited about them, and that's because Joey McGuire does a great job of selling people on his team. Like, he's a talker, he's a great recruiter because the man can talk. He could sell you, ice in the winter. So it's just, that's who he is. He's that good. But for me, this year, they were picked to finish 9th. Like, were they expected to do much this season? I don't think so. So for me, I think there's just added pressure from outside people. But at the same time, like, if you go back and look at the history of Texas Tech, like, obviously Cliff Kingsbury had his issues with playing defense and everything like that. But for me, If you go back to 2018 when Alan Bowman was there, yes, the Oklahoma State quarterback now was at Texas Tech back in 2018, which seems like forever ago. He had injuries there. So for ever since then, whether it was Tyler Show, Baron Morton, who's the starter now, whoever it is, they've had the worst quarterback luck in the Big 12. Like nobody's had worse quarterback luck in the Big 12 than Texas Tech. Last season, they were down to their third string with Jake Strong at times. And I'm sorry, but you're just not going to be competitive with your third string quarterback in this conference. But I will say this about Texas Tech, and this is what kind of my shining spot for them or their bright spot for them. Joey McGuire's had back-to-back winning seasons for the first time since Mike Leach was there. Like, think about that for a second. Like, and
Really?
how hard has he been able to do that with third string and second string quarterbacks when you've had this whole line of people, when Cliff Kingsbury had Pat Mahomes for crying out loud, and he couldn't put back-to-back winning seasons together. Like, if you think about what Joey McGuire's been able to do there in Lubbock and you really kind of deep dive into it, I'm very impressed. And look, and what's going on in Lubbock right now, you're seeing a bunch of money pumped in the program. They've had some facility upgrades, stadium upgrades, all those types of things, but that's probably the part of the problem too. But Joey's also a very likable coach too. So for me, I don't think there's a ton of hype around Texas Tech. I think maybe people here and there putting added pressure on it. But I think really once you look into the details and the nitty gritty of it, I think he's done a pretty damn good job.
Wow. That stat blew my mind.
Yeah.
You've got Patrick Mahomes, and you don't win.
Nope.
You don't have a winning record back-to-back seasons. That's crazy. And I know that really since I can remember and have followed football, Tech hasn't been good. Like they've just been mediocre at best. But still, it's in my head. Mediocre at best. Yeah, probably a 7-win team every year. So that does help put it into some perspective. But man, that kind of
It's a good
startled
stat.
me.
It's
It
a
kind of
great
startled
stat.
me. And like I tweeted out on Saturday night, I was just having a little fun. And I'm like, how far away is the Texas Tech hype? Like, was it just because Iowa State ran the ball from shotgun 3 straight times on the one back in 2022? Like, that was a huge win for them. Bad loss for Iowa State. But I was just poking some fun there. So, kind of a similar team to Texas Tech, where it feels like they're always treading water but haven't lived up to their expectations is West Virginia, and they suffer just a beatdown loss to Penn State, a really good Penn State team. Is that just who West Virginia is?
I don't think so. I know a lot of people are very disappointed with this game, and rightfully so, West Virginia fans. Hell, I picked West Virginia to win that game. They made me look like a complete idiot on here, but it is what it is. It's one game. It's the first game of the season. They had a bad day, and I think the weather delay honestly made it worse. The offensive game plan to me was bland, and the play was sloppy. The offense couldn't capitalize off mistakes. West Virginia could not run the football at all, and that's kind of their bread and butter offensively with C.J. Donaldson and Garrett Green. Like, they're going to pound the ball, and you know what's coming. It's like, hey, if you're going to stop it, you try to stop it. But Penn State did a great job. I mean, Garrett Green looked really average, and he was one of the guys that Neil Brown was talking about this offseason about when ESPN made their top 100 list and Garrett Green was not on there. Neil Brown was pissed. But after that game, like, there's no way you can justify that Garrett Green's a top 100 player in the country. You just simply can't. But and defensively, they couldn't stop Penn State on the ground. They were just sloppy. It made me, like I said, it made me look like a fool. One thing I will say that I noticed about this game, obviously both teams were pretty jittery kind of coming out. Like, they were definitely a little bit shaky. They were not playing their A game. But when Penn State calmed down, they looked like a top 10 team in the country. Like, and at that point, the game was over. But for me, once Penn State kind of settled in, West Virginia just really didn't have a chance. And like I said, I thought the weather delay might help them a little bit to kind of reset, but it just didn't appear like it did at all.
Yeah, well, once again, I think this says a little bit more about Penn State than it does West Virginia. Just for the Nittany Lions, with all they have not endured, that's not the right word, but all of the years where they have come up short of what maybe their fans expected or what the media has expected out of them, there's just a lot of staleness in the program for a program that's been a top 8 or 9 program in all of college football the last decade, which is no slight at all. So they add Kettle Nicky from Kansas as their offensive coordinator, and who knows, maybe they just are a top 5-6 team in the country, and West Virginia is not built to compete with that team right now, and that's where I land on it. Do I think West Virginia is a 9-win team this year? No. I think there's a little bit of the regression of the mean. Benefited from kind of a soft-ish schedule last year. Won a lot of close games. But yeah, I didn't really expect West Virginia to be too competitive in that game, but I thought they'd maybe be a little more competitive.
Oh,
A
for sure. It
team
was disappointing for sure. I don't think without a doubt it was definitely disappointing for everybody.
I don't know if Coach Prime would say his team was disappointing on Thursday. I most certainly would. Are you going to buy or sell Colorado?
As tempting as it is to maybe, purchase a little bit of stock in them, I'm still a seller. But I'll tell you what, I did see a few positive things. Shadur Sanders is a really solid quarterback, one of the best in the conference. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Travis Hunter, my goodness.
Whew.
Last season, like he burst on the scene against TCU, and you were like, man, that guy's a Heisman candidate just week one. And it was almost the same thing again this year because he just put on quite the damn show. And that catch he had in the end zone where he was literally just put his hands up and the ball just caught it right between the defender. I mean, that was incredible. And for me, the other X factor for them, Jimmy Horn Jr., my goodness, the guy can just run out of his shoes. He's going to be a problem from some of these corners in the Big 12 because you now have a 1-2 punch at receiver with Horn and Travis Hunter. Like, that's pretty damn dangerous. For me, the biggest thing with Colorado in that one was the defense really adjusted at halftime. Like, they made some great adjustments at halftime, and they really shut down North Dakota State in the second half from what they wanted to do. The one big reason why I'm still not going to buy on Colorado is the offensive line, because I think you saw in that game Sanders was pressured a ton of times. Like, every time he dropped back, like he had to make something happen with his legs to buy some time and then throw the football, because that's really what he has to do. For me, I just, like I said, I don't think the offensive line is going to hold up for the rest of the season. It may work against North Dakota State. Is that going to work against a team like Utah or Kansas State or Iowa State? Like, I'm not too sure it will. So for me, I'm still selling on Colorado.
Yeah, a lot of flash. There's no doubt. You're a fool if you're not appreciating how good Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter are. But at the same time, there's no substance. It's not going to hold up over the course of a season, especially when you're playing Travis Hunter so many snaps both ways. It is so impressive what he's doing. It might not be the greatest thing for his long-term future. For his sake, I hope he doesn't get hurt. He's that good of a talent. But it's also worrisome that you're playing your best player every single snap, and you're playing with fire, and you add in no protection for your quarterback. He's going to take a lot of hits. He got hit a bunch last year. I'm definitely selling. And then we didn't even mention they had the game won. They just had to take 3 knees, and the game is over. And I don't know whose call it was. I don't know if it was the OC, if it was Coach Prime, if it was Shadur, but they take a shot, 1st and 10, down the field, incomplete, clock stops. You give North Dakota State a chance to go and win the game. Are you kidding me?
No,
I'm not
I'm
buying.
glad you brought that up. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And to your point there, Dion after the game like defended, like he didn't even
Yes.
apologize after it whatsoever. He didn't say, "Oh, that was my mistake." Did he not watch the Miami Georgia Tech game from last year? Does like he knows what happens when you don't kneel the football and just play the game out? Like, why the game should have never been that close to begin with. But the fact that he didn't even own up to that mistake is that's prime time. That's prime time for sure. So we're both not out on Colorado, but we're going to bring up another school here. Can Arizona be a contender with what you saw on Saturday night with that defense of theirs?
Dude, I don't know. My gut tells me no. And then I rewatched the game and their offense is so good. It is so explosive. So I'm going to land on a soft yes, because did they get lit up by New Mexico? Absolutely. Is lit up probably too soft of a term? Probably. Like New Mexico was moving the ball at will against them in the first half, but is their offense good enough to where they become the team that you just do not want to go play because it's going to turn into a track meet no matter what? Think those old Cliff Kingsbury, Patrick Mahomes, Texas Tech teams. That's where my mind goes to. And I truly think Fafita and McMillan are that good that they are still contenders. But man, that defense, it's worrisome to say the least. That might be, throw BYU and Houston out of it. Other than those two, that might be the worst defense in the league.
Yeah, I'm still selling on Arizona. Last week on the show, I picked them as my most overrated Big 12 team, and it was because of that defense that I was worried about. Offensively, you've already mentioned they're going to be fine with Noah Fafita and McMillan at receiver, but unless they can change some things up defensively, they're just going to get into a bunch of shootouts. I mean, how do you let New Mexico, who was terrible, run for over 200 yards against your defense? To me, like you said, Jake, they are very comparable to those Texas Tech teams, those old school Texas Tech teams that just light up the scoreboard every single week, trying to get in these shootout games. And that's something we really haven't seen in the Big 12 over the last few years because there's been a complete change offensively with a bunch of these teams that are trying to incorporate running the football, being more balanced. Arizona just is going to just light up that scoreboard every single week and be like, hey, we're okay with winning 54-50 or whatever it may be, because they just don't care as long as they keep winning. But defensively, I'm not buying them because they are to me, just that's a problem. It's just you got to play some kind of defense. You can't just win games like that week in and week out consistently. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to watch it happen just because, like you said, we haven't seen that in a while. And trust me, the media, big bad ESPN and all the huge college football media, they would tell you, oh my gosh, Arizona fits right in. But
yeah,
that truly is something that hasn't consistently been in the Big 12 in about a half decade. So that leads right into this question. We just brought him up. Certainly a contender. Who's the best receiver in the Big 12?
I sold on Arizona, but damn it, McMillan is the best receiver in the Big 12. Gosh, he is so good. 6'5", 6'5" wideout. It's like an NFL size wideout. Great hands. He's got the speed. Like you saw him catch that little route on the outside and just took it to the house like 50 something yards. I know it was against New Mexico. Their defense is just as bad as probably Arizona's, but the man had 304 yards and 4 touchdowns in one game. Forget about being the best receiver in the Big 12. He's probably the best receiver in the entire country. Like anybody would take that guy. Like there was a reason why so many schools were interested in him this offseason once their head coach left Jed Fish, because they wanted him. And I don't even want to know how much he would have gotten paid. Like, could you imagine an SEC school paying that guy? Like how many? It had to be over $1 million probably for him for at least one season and all the endorsements he would get with it. So for me, he's by far right now the best receiver in the conference.
I'm going to go with Travis Hunter. I think we saw what he could do against North Dakota State. Just some impressive catches. And I say this because I think Hunter's got top 5 draft pick potential. And they're both very different receivers in that sense as far as play style. But man, I would maybe go as far to say that Travis Hunter could be the best player in the country. And if he was on a winning team, which he won't be, and if non-quarterbacks could win Heisman Trophy, which hasn't happened since Devonta Smith, I think he would be a legit Heisman candidate. But Colorado's going to go 4-8, not at all to the fault of his heroics. I think he is just unbelievable, and I hope he can stay healthy because he's appointment viewing every single week.
No, for sure. I think you're right on the money there. If Travis Hunter, if not for the record, probably belongs in New York City at the end of the year, because it would be a damn shame if he's not there, because he truly is one of the best players in this conference. And speaking of guys, we're talking about these great receivers with Travis Hunter and McMillan. How about a guy that's having trouble hitting his
Oh.
receivers? And that is KJ Jefferson from UCF. Jake, can UCF overcome KJ Jefferson's struggles?
So considering that last year UCF's biggest problem was winning on the road, you need a competent quarterback. That's probably a fair word. You need a competent quarterback to go win on the road. And while it seemed like in every facet of the game UCF was elite in their home opener, their quarterback was pitiful. And that begs the question, can you win despite bad quarterback play if everything around it is so good? And they have so many weapons, just an abundance of weapons. They had, I believe, 2 guys rush for over 150 yards. Probably should have written that down. But they can do everything. They just need KJ Jefferson to make the easy throws. And he wasn't anywhere close to doing that. So does he adjust week 2? Does he look a little better? Maybe, but I'm still not. I still can't picture UCF playing in Dallas at the end of the year if KJ Jefferson is looking like he did last week, no matter how good they are everywhere else.
There's an old saying that he can't hit the broadside of a barn, and they must have been talking about KJ Jefferson when they came up with that saying, because from what I saw last week, my answer is no on UCF. They're one of the teams I would probably start selling a little bit. The guy didn't complete a single pass until the 3rd possession of the game. He didn't look confident at all. Like you said, it was great. UCF ran the football efficiently. RJ Harvey, Penny Boone, Miles Montgomery, that's arguably the deepest backfield in the entire Big 12. And then when you add a guy like KJ with his size in the box, I mean, that's just a run threat every snap pretty much, because that's going to be one tough thing to stop. But if you do stop it, I mean, at some point he's going to need to step it up, and I'm not sure if he can just do that. UCF's not going to go out and run for 300 or 400 yards every week against these Big 12 opponents. That's just not going to happen. That's not realistic. At some point, he's going to have to put together a drive that UCF needs, and in a key or clutch moment, they're going to need him to make throws. I just don't think he's going to be capable of doing that. Now, the one thing you could argue is that during his time at Arkansas, he did get better. He was one of those guys that got better as the season went on. But from what I saw, though, I can't really buy into it week in and week out as UCF being a Big 12 title contender right now.
Yeah, it was bad enough to where if he has a similar half, if he goes out week 2 or week 3 and plays the first half like he did that first half of the season, he could get benched. It was that poor. So I'm with you. I don't think I can see them in Arlington as long as KJ Jefferson's playing along those lines. Shifting to a similar style of quarterback whose floor is much higher than KJ Jefferson, I believe. What were your thoughts on Avery Johnson in week 1?
He was just okay for me. He didn't have to do a ton in that game due to the score, but he showed some flashes like what we saw from him last season. I think just Kansas State kept things very vanilla. I've said this before, but there's going to be some growing pains with him. He's going to make mistakes, and it's going to be how he responds to those mistakes. That's important for me. That's what I want to see. I want to see him in those tough moments. Maybe throws an interception, or maybe throws a pick 6 in a game. How's he going to respond to that as a quarterback? That's really what I want to see from Avery Johnson. Because like I said, the mistakes are going to be there. It's just a matter of how he responds to them. Obviously the talent, he's there, but we're just going to need to see it week in and week out. I'm just not sure we truly learned a lot after just putting a beat down on UT Barton. No disrespect to them. That's just really, we're not going to learn much from just one game from him. So, once we get in Big 12 play, weekend, probably mid-October, I think we'll know a lot more about Johnson, where he stands. But obviously he was the guy that came with a ton of hype this season.
Yeah, in the first half when it was still a game, I counted only a handful of times that he threw down the field. One, he threw for a touchdown on that seam route along the sideline, and the other was an interception. So I would have liked to see them be a little more aggressive. I get why not, but nothing week one really swayed me either way yet on Avery Johnson. But you would think if the coaching staff did really trust him to be throwing the ball downfield, they would have had him try that against an inferior opponent. And that's where part of me thinks the staff might not completely trust him downfield. And again, I made this point last week. They don't need him to be John Elway to win the Big 12 championship. So maybe that's all his role is as a sophomore, is kind of a dink and dunker and an elite run threat, because we saw just how good his backfield mate is in DJ Giddens. So again, I'm not completely sold on Johnson as a passer yet, but I think he's going to be a winning quarterback.
Kind of taking a look at more of
sense.
for sure. I think you're definitely right on that one. Taking a look more of a national perspective here, which is something we're probably not going to do a ton on this show. Who had the worst week? Was it the Big 12 or was it the ACC? Because everybody loves comparing these two conferences for obvious reasons during all throughout the summer. So, Jake, who you got on that one?
You could really make the argument both ways. So if you're making the argument for the Big 12, it's that a lot of those middling teams didn't look impressive. You could make the argument Iowa State didn't look great. I wouldn't disagree with you. Of course, Texas Tech almost lost to an FCS opponent. West Virginia got humiliated in their marquee game. Houston looked terrible. So there's just a lot of those games where middle of the road teams didn't look awesome. But then you look at the ACC and Clemson humiliated. Clearly not the Clemson of old anymore. Like that's just obvious. Florida State, that goes without saying. Florida State went from a team that felt like they were a snub to make the college football playoff last year to I don't think they're going to make a bowl game this year. They look that bad. And those are two of your three teams that were going to be playoff contenders. But on the other hand, Miami looks like they're back. And that's not a term I use loosely. Like, they looked every bit the piece of a national championship contender. So with that, despite how good Miami is, I think the ACC, as far as perception goes, had a worse week.
I'm going to show my bias here, but damn, it was the ACC, and it was the ACC hands down. Florida State, you just mentioned, lost 2 games, and they got whipped by Boston College on Monday night. They got embarrassed by Boston College.
Yeah.
Clemson got the piss beat out of them by Georgia. I think the Dabo effect is completely worn off of Clemson by now, because his refusal to use the transfer portal or make any kind of significant changes in that building, it's going to go down, and it's going to go down in flames. So for me, Clemson's already off the table. Another one nobody's talking about, Virginia Tech.
Oh, that's another one.
To Vanderbilt. My God, how embarrassing is that for the ACC? And people were talking about Virginia Tech being a possible title contender in that conference, and that just throw that away right now. I mean, a loss to Vanderbilt's absolutely inexcusable. Miami, like you said, was the only saving grace for the ACC last weekend. When 3 of your top 5 teams lose, that's why the Big 12 is much better shape right now, because the Big 12 did not have their conference title contenders lose games. The ACC did, and their playoff teams, they're teams that are hoping that they would get in the playoff, like Florida State, like Clemson. They almost have no shot right now unless they just go out and win the ACC. And right now, I don't know if you can really pick out anybody outside of Miami that's going to be a serious threat to Miami right now in that conference. And as bad as the West Virginia loss was to Penn State's a top 10 team, and West Virginia was picked to finish 8th in the Big 12.
Correct.
This was not people picking Clemson to win the conference and then people picking Georgia to win the conference, and they get blown out by, 30-something points. I mean, we're comparing apples to oranges here. Those are not the same things. So for me, it was definitely the ACC. Definitely had the worst week for me.
I completely agree. And that kind of gets to our next topic, which is, did your number of contenders in the conference change in week 1?
I say no. For me, I would still say no. I still think I said before last week on the show that there are 10 teams who have a chance of getting to Arlington. I'm still sticking with that. I'm not going to overreact over one game. Teams are going to shake some rust off in week 1. That's just how it is. They're going to make mistakes, but maybe come back around in a few weeks. My answer might change, but for now, again, I'm not one to overreact. Like trust me, there were some total scares in this conference this week, and there were some things I really didn't like from what I saw. But at the same time, it's week 1. Like these teams are still getting in their groove. Some of these teams had to play actual, good teams. I
Right.
mean, that's just what it is. Like you start your season off with Penn State. Like how many other programs are doing that? Like usually everybody's playing an FCS cupcake game, and we're going to play the top 10 team in the country. Like it's a totally different animal in that regard. So for me, I would say no. I'm still sticking with 10 at this point. And I'm going to, like I said, it could change, but for now, I'm staying the same.
So as you know, I went bigger than you did. I had 12. Not necessarily teams I actually think could win the conference, but if I just think craziest case scenario in my head, could I see this team playing for a championship in Dallas? So that's why I went 12. I'm going to knock it down to 9 this week. After seeing it on the field, I do not see a world where Colorado, Texas Tech, or TCU are playing for a Big 12 championship. And that's 8 to 9 is probably the number we both should have started with, but it's a little better to be safe than sorry. I have no fear in crossing those 3 teams off. And I know for a fact this won't come back to bite me. Aiden, cut it. Just mark this, put it on Twitter, feel free. And I have no fear that this will not come back to bite me come December.
It's better if you cast a wide net now, and then that way you can kind of shrink it a little bit. Comparing if you just have a smaller net, you can't really make that net bigger, if you get what I'm saying. So,
and then by week 4, it'll be down to 2 teams, and I'll be dead wrong.
Exactly. It's a pretty interesting topic we both kind of thought of here, Jake. Talking about kind of leading into Iowa State now. Is Rocco Becht a top 3 quarterback in the Big 12 conference right now?
It is such a tough question because I think there's a top 2 that's pretty concrete. I think we'd both agree on this. Noah Fifita and Shedeur Sanders. I think that's a pretty clear 1-2. Not necessarily in that order. You could have Shedeur 1. And then, to me, it comes down to 3 guys for 1 spot. And it's in no order: Rocco, Cameron Rising, and Jalen Daniels. I would still barely give the edge to Cam Rising. But on Saturday, Rocco missed 3 throws in the first 3 drives of the game. One was on 3rd down, another was 2nd, another was 3rd down. After that, he didn't miss 1 single throw. He didn't really even miss a read. He pretty much played a perfect game from that point on. I just think Rocco is in such command of this Iowa State offense. And comparing that to this exact day last year where we had no idea, I don't know if Iowa State had any idea what they had in Rocco Becht. So the fact that we're even entertaining this as a top 3 quarterback is pretty impressive. I would still go Cam Rising, though, and I'll take Rocco over Daniels just because of Daniels' limitations through the air.
No, it's definitely pretty impressive when you consider where this program was going into last season. Now we're talking about Rocco Becht being a top 3 quarterback in the conference. For me, I'll probably catch a lot of flack from the Iowa State faithful here, but I'm not buying Rocco as a top 3 quarterback at this moment. I think he's great, but right now I wouldn't say he is. He had a great season last year. Obviously, his confidence grew as the weeks went on. Solid season. But is he better than Jalen Daniels? Is he better than Cam Rising, Shedeur Sanders, Noah Fifita? I don't think so right now. I think he's still got more to prove. He's more proven than Avery Johnson. I will say that right now.
Totally.
That's a fact. He's more proven than Avery Johnson. But I think you could also make an argument that Johnson has the higher ceiling over Rocco. But Rocco still, it's not a shot at him or anything. He's still a top 5 quarterback in the conference for me. And who knows, maybe he gets into that top 3 discussion. For right now, I'm still gonna, put it on hold for right now. But I just give it some time. Give it some time. I need to see a little bit more from Rocco. I mean, hey, if he goes out and beats Iowa here, maybe my conversation gets a little bit bigger. But just right now, I just don't see it. I don't think he's better than those guys I just mentioned at this moment.
Can I give a hot take?
Shoot.
Would it be crazy to say that those 5 we just mentioned, Noah Fafita, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Rising, Jalen Daniels, Rocco Becht, is it crazy to say that those 5 could all go into the Big Ten and be the best quarterback in the entire conference?
I don't think that's that crazy to say. I really don't. But Big Ten quarterbacks, though.
I was not impressed at all with Dylan Gabriel. Like, I don't think it's crazy at all to say these guys could all go in and be top 3 quarterbacks. But you kind of go Dylan Gabriel, Drew Aller, and then who? I don't know. Just food for thought. Obviously, different conferences, different defensive levels, different playmakers. But
be bad for my Heisman pick because I picked Dylan Gabriel to win the Heisman this year.
Yeah, I don't know if I liked what I saw at him playing against Idaho on Saturday night. He had like 400 yards, but not a lot of red zone execution and not exactly a lot of aggressiveness. But nonetheless, that's an old Big 12 quarterback, which we will get to in a little bit. But first, we've got a trivia question from our lovely producer, Aiden Wyatt.
All right, fellas. It is Cyhawk week, so we're going to have a little Cyhawk theme here.
Oh, all righty.
All right, here's how we're going to do this. Because there is going to be someone who is closer because it's a number. What year was the first Cyhawk game? And here's how we're going to do this. Before you answer, I want you to put your answer in the private chat that only I can see. Well, I guess you guys can see it too. But you know what? Text me. That's how we're going to do this. So neither one of you can know what the other person is guessing. No Price is Right rules. Whoever's closest.
And the first ever, not the first since the break, correct?
First ever.
First ever. Okay. I'm
First
gonna Google it. Oh wait, did I say that out loud? No, I'm kidding. Okay.
I just sang mine.
Okay, very different answers. Jake had 1952.
I'm way off. I'm way off. I knew that as soon as I sent
you
it.
are right. Derek had 1904. It was 1894. So
hey, I'm within
Derek gets
10
the
years.
win. Yeah,
I'm within 10 years. That's pretty
that was
close.
a really good guess. Iowa State won 16-8 in Iowa City. The first meeting in 1894.
It's been a Cyclone State ever since. It's been a Cyclone State ever since.
That's what we hope.
Yeah, as soon as I sent that, I knew that was wrong. I don't know why I was just thinking like, okay, I know the K-State rivalry and the Missouri in Nebraska. So I was thinking like they started playing a little later. But
so
honestly,
they actually didn't have a
1952
Cyhawk in 1952. That was during the hiatus.
That might have been when they started the
Oh.
break. Because
So
they came back and
they
I think
started the break
77.
in 34 and came back
Oh,
in
wow.
77. So you split that
is
right
a
in
okay.
half pretty much.
That is a shame that rivalry had to stop for that long. That's not good. I hate that.
Fortunately, I don't know how many times Iowa State would have won that rivalry during those years. But it might have helped the overall record. But yeah, let's get into it. We just brought it up. It is Cyhawk week. I'm gonna crack open a nondescript beer in a nondescript koozie.
Corn can.
Iowa
right there.
State. So this series, a little background. This math is not going to make sense to you, Derek. I don't know if you know this stat or not. So Iowa has won 8 of 10 in the series. But Iowa State has won 3 of 5 at Kinnick Stadium. How is that possible, might you ask? Well, the Big Ten was scared of football during the pandemic and didn't allow football at least until October.
Wieners.
So the game didn't happen. But it also didn't change the Cyhawk schedule. So it went from Ames in 19, no game 20, Iowa City 20, or back to Ames in 21. So Matt Campbell has only coached 3 times over in Iowa City. One of them was a second career game. You can kind of throw that out the window. So I like to think with a real team, Matt Campbell is 1-1 over in Iowa City. And that I don't really think matters. It just does kind of put it into perspective a little bit that it feels like more often than not, Iowa State has had the pressure on them in this game, which I think is fair to say. But as we look ahead to the Cyhawk game, Derek, what is your biggest X factor or question for Iowa State's chances?
I think right now the first thing that comes to mind is the Caleb Bacon injury. I mean, that injury on Saturday was devastating. Did not look good. I didn't know how long he was going to be out for. Now, obviously, Matt Campbell said that there's a chance he could come back this season, which is great. But at the same time, it sucks that he's not going to be able to play in this game because now you're going to have some of your younger linebackers step up in this game. You're going to might be playing some true freshmen, true sophomores. So, and I expect to see maybe Bo Freeler down in the box a bit more, playing, with those linebackers are right by them, I guess you would say. But for me, the focus here is going to be all about discipline. It's kind of you kind of have to do that when you play Iowa. Gap control, steady tackling. You know what's coming. Obviously, Caleb Johnson's fantastic running back for Iowa. You know he's going to be the guy you're going to want to key on. And I'm sorry, I know people are talking about Cade McNamara as a threat throwing the football after they put however many points on Illinois State, but I'm still not buying him as a true great quarterback in the Big Ten. I mean, you mentioned the Big Ten already, kind of a lackluster conference for quarterbacks. So defensively, I think if they just play their gaps, stay in control, and just don't over pursue things, I think they'll be okay. And their defensive line, to me, is good enough to go against Iowa's offensive line. Like, I kind of feel okay with that. The linebackers, again, very questionable in this game. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. But everywhere else, I feel like it's a pretty good matchup. My biggest thing offensively, though, just let it rip. There's that old clip of Les Miles saying, he was talking about playing when they were playing Oklahoma. He's on the sidelines, just like, let her rip. Like, that's exactly what Iowa State should do here. Do not play Iowa's game. You're not going to out Iowa. Not many teams can do that. And Iowa State, quite frankly, is not built to do that. So I don't think you need to get in that matchup with them. This offense is built to get the ball to your playmakers, Higgins, Noel, Brahmer, and Sama. And speaking of Sama, like, maybe get him involved in the passing game too, coming out of the backfield. Make this defense cover the entire field. If I were Taylor Mouser, on the very first play of this game, if I have the football, I am taking a shot downfield. Like, I'm showing that I'm not scared to stretch the field at all. Because to me, that's what you should want to do. You need to force Iowa to get into uncomfortable situations, uncomfortable downs. So they have to respect you throwing the football. Because like I said, why do you want to get in a matchup against Iowa where you're just playing the same style of football as them? Like, you're not going to win that matchup. Like, it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. And the other thing is, for me, is Iowa State's just got to avoid that big mistake, whether it's on special teams, as we've seen over the years, whether it's Rocco or whoever throwing a pick six. Like, those mistakes cannot happen in Iowa City, because if you do that, you're giving free points to Iowa. That is the last thing you want to do in that stadium for me. So I think if you just play clean football, don't turn the ball over, tackle, gap control, pretty much basic fundamental of football. And then offensively, like I said, with Taylor Mouser, just open up that playbook and just let it rip.
You really took the words right out of my mouth, so I'm not going to echo too much of what you said. I will pick up right where you left off when talking about stupid mistakes. So this comes from our good friend Alex Gukin on Twitter, on the X World. So he tweeted out, here is all of the bad things that have happened in the last 4 Cyhawk games. 6 interceptions, 4 lost fumbles, 2 blocked punts, 1 blocked field goal, 1 fumble returned for a touchdown, 1 pick six, and 1 muffed punt. None of that can happen.
Ouch.
None of that can happen in Kinnick Stadium. So special teams, you got to be clean. That's just all it is. You can't have a punt get blocked. You can't do anything that Iowa wants to do. Iowa thrives on that stuff. They've got the devil magic. Just whatever it is, stuff like that happens in Kinnick Stadium. As far as offense, I completely agree with you. I think you air it out. I wouldn't run it more than 6-7 times all game, just because Yeah, I know that's a hot take. Like, I would seriously just try and throw it 45, 50 times. Because the offensive line, I thought they looked all right. All right, game one, run blocking wise. But their strength is pass blocking. And that Iowa, their strength is stopping the run. Well, really stopping everything because they're a really good defense. But if they had to choose one thing to stop, they are so much better at stopping the run, maybe than any other team in the country. So you just play to your strengths. Iowa State doesn't really give up a lot of sacks. Guess how many sacks Iowa had last year in this game? 0. They didn't get to Rocco Becht. I don't think that's going to happen much with Iowa. And then again, you've got those weapons. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll, both probably NFL draft picks. And while Iowa's secondary is always really good and something you can count on, their secondary still isn't the same as 2 years ago when Iowa State went in there with Xavier Hutchinson and beat the Hawkeyes. I'm sorry, but TJ Hall and Jamari Harris is a step down from Cooper DeJean and Riley Moss. So it's all there. And you factor in a quarterback that you just trust to make really good decisions. Like, it really, since Iowa State turned the page into Big 12 play last year, if you had to nitpick Rocco, it hasn't really been decision-making. It's just the occasional overthrow. That was his problem Saturday. So cut down on maybe a couple of those early, probably nerve overthrows, and trust in Rocco to make good decisions, and just I think you just got to try and get to 20 points. And then on defense, I think you just got to stack the box. The run defense was not great against North Dakota. Part of it, I think the game plan was bland by design. I don't think Iowa State was trying to just shut North Dakota down. I think they were pretty content with North Dakota trying to 4-yard play and 5-yard play their way down the field and try and score a touchdown, and it didn't work. Like, they were able to go down the field, but they settled for a field goal through a pick. You get the point. So Iowa's going to be in 12 personnel, sometimes 13 personnel. You probably got to bring Malik Verdon up and run coverage. I think you got to go to a 4-man front, which I've got a hunch they probably will, and they're probably trying to hide it because they haven't really done that consistently since the year 2016. That was a long time ago. My Cubs actually were fun to watch back then. And then you just put Bo Freeler on Luke Lachey, and you trust that your defensive backs are better than the Iowa wide receivers, which I think they are. I know they looked improved over in Iowa City week 1. I was there. Certainly improved from what they've had in the past. But I still don't trust that Iowa's receivers just overnight became this elite unit. So all that being said, I think that's the recipe for success. And I guess in about 10 minutes when we make our picks, we'll see if that's what I actually think will happen. Before we get into our picks, Aiden has a random Big 12 quarterback. Again, this could be really any time in the last 20 to 25 years. He's going to give us 3 clues. Here we go, Aiden.
All right. He wore blue.
All right.
He played for the Broncos, but probably not the Broncos that you're thinking of. And he's a Grey Cup and USFL champion.
What in the world? All right, blue teams. And again, so
those are probably
for example,
horrible clues, but
so we decided last week that they had to play in the Big 12. Like, you can't choose Steve Young for BYU, right?
Correct.
Okay. So blue team.
Yeah, that set of clues. My goodness.
You want me to give
it's gotta
another
be
clue?
Kansas. Gosh, I got nothing. So yeah, one more clue.
Let me find one that won't give it away.
Played in blue.
So
played for the
I'm thinking there's a Kansas quarterback that transferred to Boise State, but I've got like no recollection of any Kansas quarterback before Jalen Daniels because they were all so bad.
Got that right.
There's been just a slew of Kansas quarterbacks. Like it's been a quarterback graveyard for before Jalen Daniels got there. I mean, for like 10 years.
He didn't really play until he was a senior. He started as a junior, but had a season-ending injury 4 games into the season.
Was it in the last 5 years? 6 years?
No.
Oh goodness.
I don't think I have
a guess.
Are we talking the Charlie Weiss era? We talking Mangino era?
Yes.
Oh boy. Yeah, I got nothing. I don't have a guess.
Derek?
I don't think I have one. If you're gonna guess, is it a quarterback from like 2013, 2014?
That would have been his freshman year was 2013.
I think
So
I
he
might
didn't
know what
play.
you're talking about, but I couldn't put a
So
name
this
to
guy
it, dude.
probably beat Iowa State.
Oh,
I guess
He
no,
would have
that
been on
was
the team,
20.
yeah.
No, that was 2014. Never mind. I was
Yeah,
thinking that
so
was
he would have been a
2014.
sophomore, but he didn't play.
I'm gonna tap out of this one. I don't even have a good guess for that.
All right. From the University of Kansas, Montel Cozart.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I don't know if
That's
I would have
why
gotten that in a
I
million
knew it
years.
was in that some era. I just could not put the name to it because I was like, I kept thinking Carter Stanley, but that I knew that wasn't correct once you said
Yeah,
Charlie Weiss era when he was there. So
that might have been too tough
all
of
right.
one, but
that was tougher than Casey Paul last week for sure.
I just thought of a new segment idea. Big 12 Kansas quarterback or college football random name generator from like the last decade. Well,
That place was a
Kansas
quarterback
is
graveyard for a long time.
Yeah. So Kansas is not on our week 2 picks. We picked 5 games. By the way, can you hear that dog barking? If
No,
not,
I
that's
just
a good
did.
thing because it is so loud. It's the loudest dog ever. I don't know if they're above me, if they're to the right of me, at my apartment complex, but man, I thought they got that dog under control. Nonetheless,
Just beat on the wall. Somebody will hear you.
Yeah,
That might make it actually that might make it worse.
Should I yell? We got a podcast here, man. Come on. Doesn't your dog listen to Bigger Than 12 on IO everywhere? Goodness gracious. All right. So we got 5 games picked out. Derek and I both went 2 and 3 last week.
Terrible.
We're gonna hope to be a little bit better. And as someone, I wish I could give him the credit. As someone pointed out in one of Derek's Twitter posts, do not follow me for betting advice. That should be rule number 1 of this podcast. You should follow my betting rules on Twitter because that shows you what not to do. You should not follow what I tell you to do. But we're going to start with a vintage Big 12 game. Colorado at Nebraska in Lincoln. The Cornhuskers are favored by 7 with an over-under of 57.5. Derek, my friend, where are you going in this game?
First of all, it's going to be an entertaining as hell game. I mean, this is one of those games I'm really looking forward to in the slate. So for me, Dylan Raiola, good quarterback for Nebraska. Little bit of a Patrick Mahomes wannabe. I mean, let's just throw that out there first. I'm not sure if Colorado is going to be able to hold up on the road in front of that crowd in Lincoln. Sanders and Hunter and Horn, they'll keep them in the game, but I think Nebraska pulls away late here. I think Nebraska is going to cover that 7 points on Saturday.
I'm not only going to go Nebraska -7. I'm going to call it my lock of the week. And I might alternate the Cornhuskers to a couple scores. I am not a believer in Colorado, and I am a believer in Matt Rule. Trust me, I know this isn't year 3 Matt Rule. That's where he really, really turns it around to where Nebraska could be a fringe playoff contender a year from now. I think this year, Nebraska actually is an 8-win team. And I know there are some 70-year-old Nebraska fans that get sick to their stomach when you think of being proud of 8 wins. But I'm a believer in Nebraska. That is a hostile atmosphere, especially if they get up early. And they're pretty well built on the interior, both sides of the ball. I think that could give Coach Prime in Nebraska a lot of problems. So from a vintage Big 12 game to a Big 12 game that's not a Big 12 game, we've got the Baylor Bears going on the road to Utah, playing in a non-conference game because this was scheduled before Utah made the move to the most fun conference in America. The Utes are favored by 14 points at home with the over-under set at 53. What a story. Well, what a story over here in Salt Lake City. Where are you going, Derek?
I've been back, and this is probably one of the games I've been back and forth so many times on this one. I look at the line here of Utah being favored by 14. Like, I think they have a chance to cover, but for whatever reason, I feel better about taking the over in this game. I think this game's going to go over 53. I think DeQuan Finn is going to be able to score at least 2 touchdowns, maybe even 3 on this. I think Utah's going to score probably almost 30 in this one. So I think I'm comfortable with taking the over on the 53. So I'm taking the over.
I almost had that thought, but I ended up deciding I think Utah is going to go out and make a statement. We know how their fans feel about being in the Big 12, and we all know how good of a coach Kyle Whittingham is. And I know this isn't an official welcome to the Big 12 game, but it's essentially a welcome to the Big 12 game. You're playing one of the maybe not better current programs in the conference, but one of the better programs with as far as recent history goes. I think Utah goes out and proves just how physical they are and that they not only can contend in the Big 12, but they can dominate in the Big 12. I think this is one of those games where they could win by 3 or 4 scores. A little bold.
Interesting. That's a good one. Moving on.
And I know
to
Baylor
the
looked,
next.
I know Baylor
Go
looked
ahead.
good.
They
I was
did.
just saying, I
think
know Baylor did look pretty good week 1, but again, that's a step up in competition.
We might have some talking points on Baylor if they do put up a fight. So we'll save that for next week, though. The next one coming up, Arkansas at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's favored by 7 in that game. The over-under set at 57.5. Jake, where are you going with this one?
I'm going to go under. I am really confident. I didn't even mention this when I talked about how Oklahoma State had the most impressive win. I probably shouldn't have buried the lead an hour into the program. I think what I saw from Oklahoma State was enough for me to be convinced that they're going to win the Big 12. And part of that, maybe something that hasn't been talked about a whole lot, is the shorter games. These games are going to be shrunk by 7 to 10 plays per game. And that is by design, because the NCAA is eventually going to grow the season, probably eventually to 14, 16 games. And they've got to be able to go to the courts and say, look, we're making an effort to shorten these games. In short term, this year, I think that is going to completely favor Oklahoma State because they have the best running back and because they don't have a quarterback that I really trust that much. And if I know Mike Gundy, he is someone who is not afraid to play to his strengths. Alan Bowman turned the ball over, I believe. Gosh, I wrote it down. I don't know where it went. I believe he turned the ball over 13 or 14 times last year. I think Mike Gundy sees that and says, you know what? We've got Ollie Gordon. We've got the best running back. Let's just not screw this up. I don't think they're going to throw the ball a ton this season at all, and I really don't think they're going to throw the ball that much against Arkansas. I think Oklahoma State easily beats the Hogs, but I would feel better about just taking the under that they win a 24-13 type game.
I'm going the opposite. I'm Arkansas to me has a capable offense with Green quarterback. Oklahoma State does as well with Bowman, Gordon, and all their weapons on the outside. For me, the question here for both teams to me is the defense. Arkansas's defense, not very good. Oklahoma State, that's probably the one area of concern I would have with them is their defense. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game than what people think. I think I'm going to take the over on the 57.5. Let me say this. It is a damn shame that these two schools haven't played since 1980. They're like 2 hours apart. Why haven't they played in the last 40 years? That shouldn't happen. These two, this should be like one of those low-key rivalry games of the old school days. So for me, this should become a thing. If Oklahoma State's not going to play Oklahoma, maybe start out with Arkansas.
That'd be a really fun rivalry. And I feel like it can always be a good barometer. I don't think Kyle Pittman's going to survive at Arkansas, but if Oklahoma State can dominate Arkansas, that's a really good sign for the Big 12 that one of your 4 best teams can take it to one of the middle of the pack teams over there in the Southeastern Conference.
The almighty SEC.
Another we're still going to call it a Power 5 just because I feel bad for Washington State. They don't deserve what happened to them. Another Power 5-ish game. The Raiders of Texas Tech going on the road to Washington State. The Mike Leach game, they're honoring the legendary, one of the best personalities, one of the best coaches this game has ever seen. Coached both at Texas Tech and at Washington State. The Red Raiders going to Pullman, favored by 1.5 points, essentially a pick 'em, with the over-under set at 65.5.
For
What do you
me,
think,
this
Derek?
is. I wrote points, and you sprinkle in more points. I have no idea who's going to win this game. I do care because I want Texas Tech to win this game. But give me the freaking over. I don't care if this over was set at 80. I would still take the over in this game because I think it's going to be one of those old school shootout type of games. Also, these two should start playing every year. This should be called the Mike Leach Bowl. And speaking of Mike Leach, put him in the damn Hall of Fame, you cowards. Yeah. I don't know who's holding it back, but somebody's doing it. He needs to be in the Hall of Fame ASAP. It's embarrassing that he's not.
So they should turn this game into a fundraiser. And with that fundraiser, they should create the Mike Leach Foundation. And the Mike Leach Foundation, that money should go towards just harassing whoever has the ability to put Mike Leach in the Hall of Fame and make it happen as soon as it can possibly happen. He's a Hall of Famer. You can't tell the story of college football without the legendary Mike Leach. And by the way, I'm totally with you. Right. Good minds think alike. Take the over in this game, just blindly.
Safe bet.
Would you take it at 150?
Okay. I like to be irresponsible, but I don't want to be stupid with the money. So no, probably not 150.
I was testing you. I was testing you to see if you're following my advice of not taking my betting advice. But yeah, I think I'd feel pretty good taking the over at 65.5. If you want to get a little creative, maybe you could bump it up a little bit, but I'm with you. I'm taking the over. And we close with the Cy-Hawk game in Iowa City. We just talked about it. The Hawkeyes are favored currently by 2.5. The over-under, they're expecting a barn burner by Iowa standards. 35.5 is the over-under. Last I checked at DraftKings. I'll go first. So, this is not my pick. If you're going to play Iowa State, parlay it with the over. If you're going to play Iowa, parlay it with the under. I just don't see a world where Iowa goes and wins a 33-30 game over Iowa State. Whereas I also don't know if I see a world where Iowa State wins a 10-7 game over Iowa. And we just talked about this in our preview, so I'm not going to go over everything. But unfortunately, I don't think that Iowa State completely, more so Matt Campbell, I don't think Matt Campbell completely gives the keys to Taylor Mauser. I think this game probably starts off a little too conservative. Iowa State digs a little bit too deep of a hole that they can't climb out of, and Iowa goes in anaconda chokehold. And I think the Hawkeyes cover and the under hits, and they win a 17-13 type game.
Oh, Jake. You know what? I was going through. I found something in my trash that I thought you might want to take a look at here. It was right by my trash can. I don't know if you could see this here. You see that? Get that piece of garbage.
Yeah, I can see.
Get that piece of junk out of here. If Iowa wins this game, I will come on this show next week and I will sing their damn fight song. I don't know what it is. It's probably terrible. I will sing their fight song. Iowa is a Cyclone state. Give me the damn Cyclones, and they're bringing back the freaking trophy right now. That's what I got to say about that.
Compelling argument, sir. You make a compelling argument. And you're a showman. You're quite the showman yourself as well.
Thank you. I don't know if it's going to win you
Well,
money,
man.
but I hope it does.
I mean, trust me. I like money, and I like our good viewers winning money as well. So, for the moneymaker's sake, I hope you're right. I think it'll be a good game. It's so hard to quantify the devil magic nonsense that can go on in this game. And I guess before we end the program, there was one other point that I didn't bring up, and that's Kirk Ferentz returning, which there's no doubt his players love him. There's no doubt that he is respected by everyone in college football as he should be. Kirk is a legend of the game, fantastic man, fantastic ambassador for the game, but he's also known to be a little bit conservative. Does he come back? Maybe put the clamps on his quarterback a little bit. Does McNamara throw an early pick, overthrow a couple guys, confidence gets shot? I mean, let me tell you this. I was there. I was covering the game. Iowa fans were booing 3 plays into this new era for Tim Lester. That's all I'm saying. If things do go sideways early, I think things could get really sideways. And that is that's something to keep an eye out for in this game. But
Kirk
one
Ferentz
thing
is
that
a
we
vampire.
haven't...
He looks like a vampire to me. He reminds me of old school Bill Snyder.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
One thing
Scary.
that we haven't mentioned yet on this show, I promise we're going to get out of here, is whoever wins the picks for the week before, so in this case week 1, we're going to call it a minute of fame. So if Derek would have won, he could just talk about whatever he wanted. If I won, I would have talked about how much the Cubs have been pissing me off in these last 24 hours. But neither of us won because we tied. We both went 2 and 3 on our picks. So we're going to bring in our lovely producer, Aiden. And Aiden supposedly is going to talk about something for a minute. So Aiden, welcome to the show. The floor is yours, my friend.
I was fully prepared to go on a rant, but I'm gonna, great power comes great responsibilities. Taking a page out of Scott Van Pelt's book. Best thing I saw today. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet or not. This was happened a couple hours ago. I think it's been tweeted. UCF is wearing helmet stickers this week that were designed by kids with cancer, and I think that is the coolest thing ever.
Gosh.
The video here on Twitter shows, I believe it's the Arnold Palmer Hospital, which is in Orlando.
Wow.
And yeah, it's
That's
the
awesome.
coolest thing that's probably ever going to happen at Central Florida if we're keeping it real.
That is
Anyway, that's all I got for you guys.
really cool.
Hats off to Central Florida for doing that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. I might change my Big 12 title pick. I know I went off the Knights earlier, but man, that's really, really cool. Yeah. Aiden, that's why you're a better man than I am. You were gonna rant and then you decided not to. But so yeah, that'll be kind of how we end the show every week. Could be literally anything, and I guess we know if it's Aiden who wins or if we tie, he's gonna choose something heartwarming. So that's really cool. But Cyhawk Week, a good second show. You got any parting thoughts before we head out of here, Derek?
No, I just want to enjoy the week, enjoy another action-packed weekend of Big 12 football. A lot of big games coming up against teams from other conferences, and as always, that's a chance for you to impress the media and the College Football Playoff Committee, of course. So, very important week for the Big 12, and no, that's it, man. I got to go. I'm out of beer, man.
Don't lose to Tulane. That's my piece of advice this week for our friends in Manhattan. But thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Bigger Than 12. It's going to be a great week too. Please like, subscribe, leave a review, and listen to everything else on this great network. This has been Bigger Than 12.